Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This will be on tool calling. So we have covered a lot of concepts around large language models and agentic workflows before. In this video, we'll be talking about tool calling. So basically tool calling is a way in which you can provide large language models some capabilities. There can be a lot of different kinds of capabilities which you can allow or which you can provide to the large language model depending upon your tools. So by definition, a tool calling is a process where a large language model, given a user's prompt, determine that it needs to interact with an external function or API to fulfill the request. Now, like the large language model can interact with multiple different kinds of like tools and multiple different kinds of abstraction layers basically. Currently what happens is that we basically talk to a large language model like these GPT models and all via natural language, and they are pretty good at returning a response in a natural language format. So they are very good in responding you in an English language, in a basic natural language in which communication happen. But when you are building agentic workflows, you might need to do more. You might need your agentic workflows to interact with APIs, interact with databases, interact with some other methods which has some existing business logic in place. And in order to do that, we use tool calling. So instead of directly answering, the large language model generates a structured tool call that specifies two things. The first is the name of the tool which is used to be called or which the large language model wants to call. Along with that, the argument. The argument is basically the parameters which it needs to send to the tool. So basically if I want to call a tool names multiply, so if I have a tool multiply which says multiply two numbers, and if a large language model wants to call that tool, then they will also have to provide the parameters like these are the two numbers which I want the multiply tool to start with or to begin with, right? These are the two numbers which I want the multiply tool to multiply your product, right? So this is the basic intuition of a large language model with tool calling capabilities. I have a small diagram here where a user is sending a human prompt to a large language model, and suppose in your workflow you want your large language model to interact with some kind of databases or some kind of APIs or some kind of web search, then you need to provide these tools so that your large language model or an LLM is capable of doing it, right? So one tool can basically build a database request or can write a SQL query for you given some inputs from the model. So the model can understand that, hey, this is a function that can write some SQL queries and interact with the database, so I can use it whenever I want. Same goes with API and same goes with the web search. And here in this video we will be developing a workflow which will do something like that. We'll look forward to this in the agendas basically. So this is the current agenda. We understand what is the tool calling. We understand what is a valid use case for tool calling. We have discussed tool calling before as well in this video. So we'll touch base upon it a bit more. We basically now what we're going to do is that we're gonna build an agentic workflow with tool calling, and we'll see how your agentic workflow can perform tool calls, and then we'll see the code walkthrough. So we'll see how you can build an agentic workflow on your own through this code walkthrough, and at the end we'll go to the conclusion that what agentic workflow is giving me the output, how it is calling the tool, and how you can do that on your own. To the agentic workflow which we'll be building in this video. So the whole concept of this agentic workflow is to help us understand that how a large language model can perform tool calling, or basically how we can provide the tool calling ability to the model. So in this one, the agentic workflow will build an agentic workflow that have a tool calling ability to query my newsletter database and get the result as a response. So people who do not know, I have an engineering newsletter called Systems That Scale, and I have been running that from past 3 years maybe, and that newsletter has a lot of additions on technical concepts, and you can find that on my LinkedIn probably. But the gist is I have a lot of additions under my newsletter, and I want my large language model, or basically I want the large language model to query my newsletter database and give me some stats or some results. So my newsletter database will have a collection of articles, and along with that, the articles, it will have a lot of information related to the articles, like the link of the article, the name of the article, how many views my article have, how many likes my article have, um, when was my article published, and stuff like that. So we have all this information in my database, and what I can do is that I can provide some tools to my large language model so that they can query this newsletter database and can give me the information. Now you can do that, like writing a code for it as well, but the gist is we are accepting natural language from a user. So user do not need to call an API or do not need to be restricted to a specific set of request they need to send. User can say anything. User can go ahead and say that, hey, can you give me top 5 or top 10 articles, most liked articles, or top 10 most viewed articles, and then large language model will take that natural language and it will gonna understand that which tool they want to call to serve this prompt. And also with that, they will also identify what argument which I need to send in the tool so that I can serve this human prompt, right? So this is the high level design of our agentic workflow. At a very high level, what will happen is that the user will send the human prompt. The human prompt will be sent to the large language model, and we are providing 4 tools currently to our model. The first one is get top n liked article. So n can be any number. I can say that like this tool will allow the large language model, or basically this tool will allow the large language model to get top 5 or top 10 articles. That is one thing. We have another tool which is get top n viewed articles. Again, n can be any number, so it will help the large language model to get top 3, top 4, top 5 viewed articles from my database. Same for the top n most recent article. It will gonna get the top 2, top 3 most recent articles, and then at last there is get all articles, which will give me all the articles at once. So these are the tools I will provide that, or basically I'll bind my large language model with these so that when I ask the query, the model has in mind that it has all these tools which it can take help with and can serve my query. So I'm gonna again drill my design down here. So here is again a very high level design, another view of our agentic workflow, of the same workflow. Basically this is basically what happens when a user is giving a prompt. So here a user is giving a prompt of get me the top 5 most viewed articles. Now what the large language model does, it sends the request to the request builder tool, and it says that okay, I want the entity as articles which needs to be sorted by views, and the limit should be 5. This is the request which the tool can build, and further this request can be sent to the newsletter database, which the tool can send this request to the newsletter database, and the newsletter database can give me the response. So the whole purpose of the request builder tool is to create the tool, or basically is to create the request that can be sent to the database that is accepted by the newsletter database, right? So the large language model might not know what should be the structure or what should be the rule of the request which the newsletter database accepts, and that is why we are adding a tool here. So the large language model will only have to worry about what it needs to send to the tool to build the database request, and then the request builder tool will take care of building the request, and the request builder tool will build the request, send the newsletter database the request, get the required response of the articles, and send the response back to the model, which will be sent back to the user. This is the high level idea. We're gonna build the agentic workflow something like that. It will do the same thing but in a slightly different way, which you will understand when you will go through the code base. And yeah, let's move on to the code walkthrough to understand what we are building here. We are doing the code walkthrough. I have the newsletter DB call Python file which I have built. It's a Python notebook actually, and we're gonna go through each tools and the entire code base line by line to understand what we are doing here. So the first thing is, as usual, importing the required libraries. I can simply run it and I can import all these LangChain libraries which will help me to create tools. Then I have some more libraries to import. An interesting thing to note here is that I'm not using an actual database. Instead of that, I have my own mock database for the sake of this demo. That is nothing but a list of article databases. You can expect that instead of that, you can have your own database, and in the tool, you can add that logic to query those results. But here, what we are doing is that we are building our own mocked database, which will have some results or some articles inside of it, and I'm importing all those articles. So basically I imported my article database here, and I can see, like, I can query my tool on top of it to get the results, right? So this will have the articles. I can see that for now I have in total 8 article in my database, 8 articles. So that should be all right, and it can have more. So your database can have hundreds, thousands, or lakhs of articles maybe, from which your tool can query. But let's, for the sake of this demo, I have simplified it. Now, interesting thing to note here is, like, or the interesting thing to see here is the tools which we are trying to build. So in LangChain, if you are trying to like build a tool can be a basic method, but you have to annotate it with a tool annotation so that the LangChain framework will understand that, okay, this is a tool and this can be bind or bound to the large language model, and then large language model can understand that these are the tools which they can use. So the first tool is get top article by views. Here, as the name suggests, it gets the top article by the views and return the number of articles, right? Basically return the number of articles. So the number of article is the number, like the top number, which states that how many number of articles need to be returned. So the number of articles can be 5, 6, 7, anything else, and the tool will return those number of articles. So if I say that number of articles is 3, then this tool will return top 3 articles sorted by views, right? And the method is very simple. I am pulling the article database results and I am sorting those results by views, right? So my article has a views field here, and I am sorting it by the views, and then I am returning the number of articles. So basically, after sorting, if I have 10 articles, then I don't want those 10 articles. I only want the top n articles. So here I am sending only top n articles. Same goes with get top article by likes. Here also the method is similar. The only difference is, instead of sorting for views, here we are sorting for likes. And again we are sending top n articles here, and then there is get most recent article. It is a bit different. Instead of sorting for likes and views, we are sorting for the published date to understand what are the recent articles. And for every sorted method, we have reversed it. So reverse true meaning we are sorting in a descending order, meaning the most recent or the most greatest value will be at the top. So here, if I sort it by the published date, meaning the most recent article which was published most recently will be at the top, and at the end, when we have this sorted list, we can return those number of articles. So if I say that I want n number of article, then it will return n top recent articles. And the last tool is get all articles. It does nothing actually. It simply returns the entire article DB result, and that is quite understandable. So I have four tools, right, which I already described in my high level design. This is how these tools can be defined, and now let's see that how we can bind these tools with the large language model, and how we can query, or we can send our prompts to the model, and we can see that whether they are using these tools or not. So this is quite simple. I'll come to this method after some time. Let's move to the initiate the agent method. So this method is also very simple. First, we collected all the tools which we have, the 4 tools which we have, we collected it, and we bind these tools with the model. So for the sake, we have an OpenAI model, the GPT 3.5 turbo model, right? And I am binding this model with the tools I have. So this line binds the model with the tool. And after that, since we have bound the model with the tool, I can query I can send my prompt, and now the LLM model, or now the large language model, will have the understanding of all these tools, and they can make a judgment that whether they have to call this tool or not. So I can send my prompt, and I can wait for the response. And in the response, if a large language model wants to make a tool call, they will have your tool calls in their tool call field. So the tool calls field will have all the tool calls which a large language model wants to make, and then we can execute these tool calls. So if there is any tool calls which needs to be made, I can further go ahead and I can execute the tool calls for my large language model. And that's where the humans in the loop comes, right? So here, this is the method which is execute tool calls, which executes the tool call which was notified to me by the large language model. These are the tool calls I have. I can just go ahead and I can loop over the tool call, and for every tool call, so if the name of the tool call is get top article by views, I can simply go ahead and I can execute it in this way. So a tool can be executed by an invoke method, because we have bound those method with a tool annotation, so they can be executed with the invoke method. I just simply need to pass the arguments which was given to me by the large language model. So all of these will be there in the model, in the response of the model, in the tool calls. In the tool calls response of the large language model, the name of the tool which needs to be called and the arguments through which the tool needs to be called will be given. So we just have to call that tool with the given argument, and this is done for all the rest of the three tools as well. If the tool is if a large language model wants to call this tool, we are calling that tool with the argument, and we are appending the result in a result array, and at the end we're gonna execute this. So this is how the entire thing works. I can simply go ahead and I can run all these to so that we have the function definition ready for us. I'll go ahead and I'll also define the execute tool calls, and I'll also define the initiate the agent. Now we have everything defined for us. Now what I can do is that I can send my query, and I can see that whether the tool calling is being done by the large language model or not. And in order to do that, I would also set my workflow in the debug mode, because when I'll set this to a debug mode, what will happen is that I'll be able to see the tool calls which a large language model wants to make. You can see here that in this method we have a debug mode parameter which is by default false. So by default I don't want to print the tool calls, but if a user specifically wants to debug it, then I'll print the tool calls. So I'll go ahead and while calling this initiate the agent method, I'll just make the debug calls true, so that when I run this, the debug it runs in a debug mode, and it prints the tool calls. So I can run this and I can see what will happen. And you can see I asked the agent that can you give me top 5 most recent articles. What it does is that it is printing the tool call from the prompt. So it got the prompt and it is trying to make some tool calls. I have printed the tool call it wants to make. It says that I want to make a tool call with name get most recent article, and the argument is number of articles, which is 5. So we passed a natural language, can you give me top 5 most recent article, and the large language model identified the right tool to be used with the right parameters. And now what I can do is that I can run the execute tool calls to execute this, and the execute tool call is running with the argument number of articles 5, and I got these 5 articles which are the most recent one. You can see the date. The first and the topmost one is from 15th June, then from 10th of May, then from 28th of April, then 5th March, and then 28th of February. These are arranged in a sorted fashion, and these are the topmost recent articles which my newsletter database have. Now this is one thing. I can make this query even more complex, and let's complicate this a bit. What I can do is that I can pick this one. So this is a bit more complicated, and this would want the model to call 2 tools at once. It says, can you give me top 3 most liked and viewed articles? So a user is saying, can you give me top 3 most liked and viewed articles? The large language model have to understand that, okay, I have to call 2 tools with the parameter 3. Now let's see what happens here. I can run this, and again the large language model gives me the tool calling. So since it is in the debug mode, I have printed the tool calls which the large language model wants to make. And here the large language model wants to make one call, which is get top article by likes. The argument is 3, that is correct. And it also wants to make another tool call, which is get top article by views, and the number of articles is 3 again. So it, from the prompt, it clearly understands that okay, I want to make two tool calls. First is get top article by likes, and the second one is get top article by views. And for both of them, they want the number of articles to be 3, and that is actually correct because I want the top 3 most liked and viewed articles. So this is correct. Large language model was able to identify the tool calling with the right arguments. Now what I can do is that I can execute the tool calls for my model. So I'm executing two tool calls, get top article by likes, get top article by view, and then I can get this. So you can see the response contains two lists. The first list is for the tool, which is the name of the tool is get top article by likes, and this is the result. The result is 1, 2, 3 articles, and you can see that these 3 articles are sorted by likes. The first one has 400, then the 300 likes, then the 250 likes, and that makes sense. Then another response is, let me expand the response for once, get top article by view. Now this tool call has the result, which has again 3 articles, and it is again sorted by the views in a descending order. The first one has the highest 1500 views, then there is 1300 views, and then there is 1200 views. So the large language model is identifying the tool call correctly, and it is like, and we are executing those tool calls for our model, and we are getting the desired result we want. So I don't have to write any SQL queries. I don't have to define anything. I can just simply talk to my large language model in natural language, and I can specify my query however I want. There is no requirement for me to have an understanding of SQL or APIs. I can simply talk to the model in natural language, and they have to figure out how to query the database or how to query an API and give me the result for me. And this is how it is done. So now whatever we have discussed in the code base, I think that was like understandable, and we saw like how you can actually make your large language model perform tool calls. Now the example which I have demonstrated is a bit simple. We didn't use any actual databases. We used our dummy databases to make query, but this was a proof of concept which proves that the large language model can query the tools, or they can call the tools correctly with the correct arguments. Now since you have this in place, you can make this workflow even more complex by integrating your database. The only thing you have to do is that in your tools, you need to get the correct argument from the large language model, and from that argument you have to build the SQL query, and you have to write the integration with the database, and you have to make the calls for your large language model within that tool with the argument which the model has given to you. You have to make the calls to the database the way which has been described here, and you have to get the response from the database. You have to collect the responses, and you have to send it back to the user. And this is how the workflow looks like, and this is what we have actually built in this video. So since we have compiled this video, we have talked about tool calling in this one, and you must have seen that from past 2 weeks I am uploading content on AI engineering on this channel, and we have already covered 2 topics, and including this we have covered 3 topics now. The first video was in this series was building a referral outreach agent using LangChain. The second was how you can optimize your agentic workflow using parallel execution. And this third one was how you can provide tool calling capability to your large language model. Now we'll be coming with more videos like this in the future, and I'll be extending this AI engineering series ahead. So feel free to subscribe to this channel and share this channel with anyone who you think will be benefited from this. And yeah, I'll meet in the next video.